Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Little Brain Campaign. This is your host, Dr. Lauren LaRose. I am a board-certified child and adolescent psychiatrist and adult psychiatrist with a private practice in Metairie, Louisiana. And on this podcast, I like to talk to various experts in fields related to mental health and physical health of kids and their caregivers. And I especially like to talk to people who are kind of operating outside of the conventional medical model, because unfortunately that's not where a lot of answers lie for most of us. So I have the pleasure today of speaking with Eileen Devine. She is a licensed clinical social worker. She has her own podcast, actually, which I have been binging on, and it's amazing. And she also has a practice where she coaches parents of children that have various neurobehavioral differences. So as many of y'all know, I have a child with PANS disease, which is pediatric acute onset neuropsychiatric syndrome. That is a type of encephalitis, autoimmune encephalitis in the basal ganglia. And it has been a roller coaster trying to parent him. And as a physician, cannot stop researching things. And so I've been listening to a podcast called Demystifying Pans and Pandas by Dr. Nancy O'Hara. If anybody is a Pans and Pandas parent, please go listen to it. And I stumbled upon Eileen's episode with Dr. O'Hara, and it was really the first time ever that someone has like validated my experience as a parent. And it was just so, it's like the words that I've needed to hear for many, many years. And so I immediately went to Eileen's podcast and started listening to it. And fortunately, she agreed to come speak with me here. So thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, thanks for asking me. And I'm just so glad to hear that the conversation I had with Dr. O'Hara resonated so strongly. I never get tired of hearing that. Because sometimes, I talk about this all the time, so I can think, is it really that helpful? I know it's helpful, but like, is it really new information? Am I just kind of talking about what people already know? But that experience of really feeling heard and seen in such a really hard experience is so powerful. So I'm so glad that happened for you.
Yes. Yeah. I think that what really drew me to your podcast, just so that everybody knows, and if you need to hear this yourself as a parent, please go listen to her podcast, is that you come from a place of compassion for these parents and empathy, and you have lived experience with this since you have a child with neurobehavioral challenges. And I think parents who have kids like this, in society, unfortunately, there's so much blame and shame.
Yep.
And the assumption is that like, if you have a kid that has behavioral issues, you're doing something wrong as a parent.
Right.
And very rarely does anyone, stop you and say like, I know you're trying so hard, and I know that this is really, really hard to do. Right.
Right. And I know that your child is doing the best they can.
Yes.
They are a tender-hearted, sweet child who wants to do well and wants to be in connection with you, wants to be included in whatever environment they're in. And there's reasons why they're struggling to do that. It's not about you. And it's not about them, right? In terms of willfulness or motivation or that kind of thing. It's about something entirely different.
Okay, so since you mentioned that, I want to talk about will versus skill, because I've listened to one of your episodes today where you talked about that, and it made me think of, we just had parent-teacher conferences for my child that has PANS, and there was so much talk about his behaviors in the sense of like, he's doing this and we need him to be doing this, and like assuming that he's not doing what they expect him to do just because he's willfully choosing not to do it, and in my mind as a child psychiatrist, I'm like, he doesn't have the skills. Like, he doesn't know how to do this. We have to teach him how to do this.
That's right. So what you describe is what a trap that we can all fall into, whether we're teachers, whether we're parents. It happens to all of us, where we get laser focused in tunnel vision on the behavior, and we want it to stop. And the reason we want it to stop is because usually it's distressing to us, to the child. It's disruptive to the environment. It's getting in the way of learning. And so, of course, we want it to stop. The
Right.
problem with that is that the behavior is really not the problem, actually. There's
Mm-hmm.
looking at the reason why that behavior is happening. That is where those behaviors will then dissipate, right? In intensity and
Right.
frequency. But because we are living in a society that is deeply entrenched in a behavioral lens, meaning behavior is willful, it is being done on purpose to me, it's always within someone's control, then of
Yep.
course we go towards that behavior and doing everything we can to control the person. That's really what it's about, is controlling the person who has the behavior. So it's this power over model versus being with them in their distress, seeing them actually as in distress. And why are they in distress? Like if they're acting this way, wow, they are really overwhelmed or they're really anxious. This environment is too much for them in some
Mm-hmm.
way. And how can I, as the adult who holds the power in that environment, reassess what assumptions am I making? Like with your child, what assumptions are the teachers making about the way his brain works and what he actually can do at this chronological age? That's where we get stuck. Oh, at this
Yep.
age, they for sure should be able to do this. And so then we write goals that are supposed to be in the interest of the child, but they're really in the interest of the adults.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's about they will demonstrate this behavior. It's like, okay, you and I have the same goal. I want him to learn. I want him to be successful in this environment. But telling him, creating these elaborate reward systems and consequences and threats of this and taking away or bribing, all of that does nothing to build his skills. It does
Yeah.
nothing to build his skills. And so, no wonder the symptoms, those behavioral symptoms, aren't getting better.
Right.
So, that's a big shift for most people in our society. And it certainly was for me. You mentioned my personal experience. My daughter's now 16. But I came to this point of not understanding what the heck was going on when she was about 3 or 4. And
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had a behavioral lens mindset. I just didn't know any different. And I wasn't being mean about it. I was still
Right.
kind. I was still, I wasn't losing my, temper, anything like that. But I still was very much in that behavioral mindset. So it's not about, are you a nice person or not? It's how are you viewing this behavior and why it's even happening in the first place.
Right. Right. So I guess like I should probably back up with you and talk about like what kinds of conditions are you like that the child has and you're helping with the parent,
Hmm.
like these
Yeah.
neurobehavioral issues.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many. I'll name
Mm-hmm.
some that are, I guess, that make up most of the parents that I work with. But, there are literally thousands upon thousands of reasons why a brain can be changed
Yeah.
in its architecture. And I have had parents reach out to me with the most rare
Yeah.
brain based conditions where I'm like Googling as I'm talking to them, like, what is this? Like, it all points back to the brain.
Yep.
So every parent that I work with, and I only work with parents, they all have kids who have brains that work very differently than society expects.
Mm-hmm.
And the root cause of that looks different. Sometimes their diagnoses for the kids are autism, ADHD, things that maybe we're a little more familiar with. My daughter, for example, has a diagnosis of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. She was prenatally exposed to substances. So that's another large population of the parents that I work with where it's suspected or confirmed. Complex trauma. Trauma changes the brain.
Yep.
So, traumatic brain injuries of some kind, seizure disorders, all kinds of rare seizure disorders, and then neuroimmune conditions. That's a
Mm-hmm.
community that found me. Again, one of those diagnoses that I was like, what is this? And I'm so glad that they welcome me into their community. It's a big part of who I work with as well. So, those are just a few. Those are just a few of the. And I work with a lot of parents too who are like, I don't know what's going on. Um, Nobody can quite figure it out. I've had lots of providers give me lots of different diagnoses, which tells me that there's a lot of confusion
Yeah.
about what's happening with this child. And no one's really stopped to consider, well, what does this all mean about what do all these diagnoses tell us about the way this child's brain works?
Right.
Right. And so parents are driving themselves crazy because they're like, oh, but they said it was this. And now they're saying it's this. It's like, none of that matters.
Yeah.
It matters for reasons like medication management benefits, that kind of thing. But in our one-to-one, day-to-day, moment-to-moment relationship with our child, that actually, the label doesn't matter.
Right.
What we need to understand is, how does my child's unique brain work, different than another child of their age, same diagnosis, and how does their nervous system work, their very
Right.
fragile nervous system work? Yeah.
So what are somewhat common behaviors, child behaviors that you talk to parents about or that you help them work through?
Yeah. So there's two sets of behaviors that I end up talking with parents about. And one set of behaviors is these are behaviors that help us understand how this child's brain works differently. So, for example, a set of cognitive skills like processing pace,
Mm-hmm.
and you ask your child to do something, and it looks as though they are ignoring you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not moving fast enough. They're just dragging their feet intentionally, right? Well, what if that behavior reflects slow processing speed,
Right.
and they need 10 to 20 extra seconds to even recognize and register that their name has been called, so that they can give you the attention that you expect.
Right. Right.
Right? So that's one set of behaviors, and there's all kinds of cognitive skills. Well, I'll give you another one that's really, really common, that's looked at through a behavioral lens as very willful. And that is the inability to initiate. It's executive functioning skill.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we see a child who can't get started, especially on non-preferred activities, that piece there, lots of judgment from parents. Well, they can get started on their iPad just
Right.
fine.
Yep.
But I asked them to do this, they can't do this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's willful. They're making a choice. So when we sit and talk about, what does it mean to quote unquote be motivated? That's a brain thing. What does it mean to get started and initiate, especially a task that's overwhelming?
Yeah.
Or non-preferred in some way? That is all about our brain.
Mm-hmm.
That behavior reflects that lagging cognitive skill in that child. So that's one set of behaviors. We could literally talk for hours on giving lots and lots of examples. They're fairly endless. The other set of behaviors are defensive behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And parents do not have any trouble identifying these, because they are what is causing disruption in the home,
Right.
lots of distress, lots of stress, lots of frustration, because parents have gotten laser focused on them and used everything they can possibly think of to change it, and it's not changing.
Right.
A lot of times it gets worse. So those are defensive behaviors. Those are the symptoms of this poor fit between this child being in their environment that does not understand their brain works differently, is not giving them accommodations. And so, yeah, of course they're distressed.
Right.
And we see that distress reflected through defensive behaviors. That's their body defending against this environment that is not set up for them and feels very, very unsafe to them. So that's why when we look at those defensive behaviors, we have to take this step back and remind ourselves, okay, the brain and behaviors are always connected. What does this tell me about my child's experience of this environment? And why might that be their experience, right? What is going on that I need to get curious about? So those two sets of behaviors are what I'm always, it's the meat of the work
Yep.
that I do with parents.
And so what does that work look like? Like, what are you actually doing with the parents?
Yeah. So I'll use the one-on-one work as an example. I run lots of groups. I have a community of parents, all that kind of stuff. So the themes are the same, but in my one-on-one work with parents, when I meet with them, we talk about what is most pressing for them. It's never their experience, which is 50% of this equation, right? And we get to that, but that's never why parents come to work with me.
Yep.
They want to have some relief from their child's behaviors in their home, understandably, and I want that for them too. And so we begin talking about the brain behavior connection, the nervous system behavior connection. We do some psychoeducation on that, connecting those two for them, and the need for accommodations. So my daughter, your child, all these other kids who have these brain changes, the brain's a physical part of our body. When the physical part of our body is changed in some way, what do? We provide accommodations. We don't think twice about that for any other physical disability.
Yep.
But it gets missed with our kids. So we establish that, like, accommodations are what's right, and it's what's just, what they deserve, but it's also the path to less challenging behaviors. And so then I have them complete what I call a cognitive skills inventory checklist. And it's just something that I've created over time that has lots and lots of common cognitive skills that you, I, any person walking this earth need to navigate our day with some ease.
Right.
And they just ask themselves, they reflect, like, does this describe my child? Do they have trouble with this? And there's behaviors that help them understand that. Once we have that information, it kind of quiets the noise. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is what's getting in my child's way. Now I just need to raise my awareness and look for that in their various environments so that I can proactively put in accommodations. And that's really the remainder of the work that I do with them. They come with the morning routine is terrible. I
Yep.
cannot get my child out of the house
Mm-hmm.
on time. It's like the minute they wake up, it's World War III.
Yep.
Like, okay, let's talk about the tasks and the expectations that are expected of your child. And do they have the skills to
Mm-hmm.
complete that or move through it in the way that you have it set up now? And
Right.
what always happens, because we don't have any parents are not given this information, so there's no shame and blame here at all. But once they have this information that they were missing and didn't even know they were missing, they start to see, like, whoa, okay, this is serious. Like, my
Yeah.
12-year-old, who I expected could do this seemingly simple thing, like get dressed in the morning on their own,
Mm-hmm.
um, they can't do it.
Yep.
And so then we think about, this is where we start to get into the parent experience, like that parent recognizing this and easing into the acceptance of who their child is. But man, it's like, wow,
Yeah.
I had no idea. I had no idea. And what does that mean for them? And what does that
Mm.
mean for me as their
Yeah.
parent? And so we always get there. We always get to the parent piece. It's why I only work with parents, because it is so much about us.
Yep. Yes. Yes, it is.
Adjusting expectations, shifting, letting our kids be who they are, all of that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, it's yeah, I mean it's I think you have a very interesting approach in working with parents, because I think most, or not most, but a lot of therapists and parent coaches who work with parents, um, I think unfortunately it comes more from a place of like, what are you doing wrong? You know, like,
Yeah.
here's the things you're doing wrong and here's how we're going to change it to change your kid's behavior. And I like how you're coming more from a place of like, um, validating and acknowledging what the parents are going through, that this is really hard. You
Yeah.
know, it is really hard to parent these kids.
Yes.
And let's just like think of how we need to adjust what we're doing. You know, I know you talked about this on your podcast where you have one, you know, quote unquote neurotypical child.
Yeah.
I have two
Okay.
neurotypical children. And if I
Yeah.
only had those two kids, I would think I was the best parent on the planet, you know, like, because they are so highly functioning and do
Yeah.
exactly what society expects them to do.
Yes.
And I probably, you know, prior to having my child who has neurobehavioral challenges, like, I probably was the provider who was not very understanding and not very
Yeah.
validating. And then I got served like the most giant piece of humble pie, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Same.
it makes you, as a provider, have so much more empathy for
Yes.
parents and what they're going through. And that, like, parenting these kids is very different than parenting neurotypical children.
Oh, it's night and day. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a whole different ball game. And I often, I mean, really, honestly, the goal of my work is to create a world where a parent gets a diagnosis for their child that points to the brain, and then they are told immediately, this is what you also need to know about parenting them.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. It can be filled with delight and with joy.
Yeah.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
always going to be this hard, but it's really, really different.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to unlearn as much as you're learning, but you can get there, and it will greatly reduce suffering.
Yep.
I mean, truly.
Yeah.
I would never say to a parent, well, it's going to be magically easy at some point, because
Yeah.
our kids are complex, right? Um, they're going to have harder days. That's a reflection of their fragility, but it could be so much less painful and
Yeah.
take such less time, right? Um, but yeah, the piece that I often think about in my work with parents is the same concepts that apply to our kids apply to them. Meaning Many of them have experienced trauma, and so they're fragile in their own ways. They have
Yep.
healing to do. There is never, ever, ever a question of motivation. They are highly motivated.
Yep.
They have literally done, I mean, the
Everything.
stories they tell me about things they've done.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Sometimes we laugh looking back. They're like, I can't believe I sent off for this or that. Promising stuff. It's like, yeah, well, of course you did,
Yeah.
because you were desperate and you're doing everything you can.
Yep.
But our kids don't need to be motivated either. They want to do well as well. And so the same ideas apply to our parents, but they are often not, given that compassion and that empathy. You're right. There's not this perspective. And that is just more damaging. It's leaving them with less capacity
Yep.
to parent this child who's really intense,
Yeah.
right, in the way that they need.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the parent experience now. Like,
Okay.
because I know that you talk about grief and trauma, even like within the parenting experience of these kids.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell us like what you see with that, with the parents you work with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's Brene Brown has, I think, the best definition of grief. And she talks about it as being the loss of what you now know will never be,
Mm-hmm.
longing for what you want it to be, and knowing that that may not happen, or longing, she describes it too as longing for things that you didn't even know you cared about until they didn't happen.
Yep.
And then feeling lost. So feeling disoriented, feeling untethered, like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Right? I think it's perfect for the parents that I work with.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes there's this, she also talks about grief being the emotion that we fear the most. And so we work really hard to keep it at arm's length, because what if it descends upon us and it just swallows us up?
Yep.
Then I can't have that happen.
Right.
Like I'm in survival mode here.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time that I get to parents where they have their head above water enough to at least reach out and start meeting with me, which in and of itself requires some capacity.
Yeah.
I can immediately see these themes of grief that have not been tapped into, again, for understandable reasons. Sometimes too, there's this fear that drives behavior. So fear is there as well. But if there's anger and resentment, I'm always looking for those themes of grief underneath, because that is often a clear sign, like, okay, it's much easier to be angry, right, than to be sad. But I've never met a parent where that hasn't been part of their experience. This parenting experience is not what I hoped it would be. It's not what I ever imagined. Why me? All of that kind of stuff, which is so, so understandable.
Yeah. And you talked about how this is a type of, I think you said disenfranchised grief, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So disenfranchised grief is a grief that is not socially sanctioned. It's not recognized by others. There's not any public or communal way of healing from it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we think about, grief, like, for example, the death of a loved one, we have all those things. People reach out to us, they check in on us, they bring us meals. There's ceremonious things that we do either through our religion or our culture. And that is what heals. That is why we heal.
Mm-hmm.
And on anniversaries, people reach out, I'm thinking of you, all of that kind of stuff. And so if we are void of that, we don't have that in this grief experience that we're talking about with parents, that leaves them kind of swimming in this ocean without a life raft. Like, how am I supposed to heal when the healing is so dependent on being seen and heard, and being in community with people who can hold that grief with you? So disenfranchised grief, there's been lots of research done on it. And this is one of the groups, parents of kids with special needs is the way they describe it. That experience for them. The other unique piece about it is not only is it disenfranchised, so unrecognized by others, but it comes in these waves, right? Developmental milestones or things that are happening with other kids that are of the same chronological age, but not happening with their child, right? Or, for example, I know, I have lots of nieces and nephews around the same age as my two kids. And when we're in our own little world, it's like what we know.
Right.
And then when we would go on, say, a group vacation, a family vacation, and all of a sudden now my daughter was in this group of same-aged peers, cousins, but so behaviorally different, needs were different, independence was different. It's like, oh, that wave of grief, right?
Yeah.
It hits you. So yeah, really, really important piece. And then the trauma piece too. I wrote this blog post called The Toll of Caregiver Trauma, and I had no idea how much it would resonate with folks.
Yeah.
It's actually how the neuroimmune community found me, was through that blog post. But most parents do not recognize the trauma that is inherent in their experience, either trauma because of the behaviors of their child or trauma from the medical system that doesn't believe them, won't listen
Yep.
to them, lack of support and services, all of that stuff, the
Yep.
school system, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is true trauma, and the intensity of the support that they need needs to match that
Yeah.
trauma. But the first step is to recognize it as that, which is really, really hard in and of
Yeah.
itself. It's not ever something you thought you'd pair with your parenting experience.
Yeah. I mean, I was just telling my husband last night, I had never conceptualized it as trauma, like what I've experienced. And when you said that, like I listened to the podcast where you were talking about trauma, and I was like, oh my God, that's what it is. Like,
Yeah.
this, like, you know, there was like so many traumatic experiences for a long time, and like we're better than where we were, but still not great. But there's a lot of re-experiencing. Like every
Yes.
time there's a speed bump, there's this, you're thrown right back into when things were really, really bad. Um, and it's funny that I'm a psychiatrist, and somehow I didn't put two and two
Mm,
together there and realize that that was trauma. But when you said it, I was like, wow, that's exactly what it is. That's what it
yes.
is.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
So something else I wanted to talk to you about was you talk about the difference between resilience and grit, and how like
Mm-hmm.
you really work with parents on building up their resilience, and then
Mm-hmm.
how to build up their child's resilience, but that this is different than grit, which I had never really heard someone distinguish the two. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it made me real. I mean, I know I'm talking about myself half the time here, but I'm like, it's like had so many like realizations listening to your podcast, and I was like, whoa, like I I think as a person, like I have a ton of grit. Like I'm, a Southern Louisiana person. We're very
Mm-hmm.
used to having like our lives destroyed and like picking back up and putting the pieces together and keep going. Like I have grit for sure, but I'm like, maybe what I'm lacking is the resilience piece. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, even just that example that you gave is so great because you have this grit where you make it through and you pick it up and you keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And so resilience is being able to make it through hard things. There's no doubt about it. But chipping away at your resilience is the just moving on and getting to the next thing,
Yep.
and not taking time to heal from what you've
Yeah.
just been through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, resilience is not about soldiering on, grit, just bulldozing my way through. If I can just get to whatever, then
Mm-hmm.
I'll be okay. Because that requires a type of endurance that none of us have.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable. And so I have worked with parents who have been in that kind of operation mode for a decade,
Yeah.
right? And they're not doing well.
Right.
And they've made it through, they have survived, but at what cost?
Right.
And so resilience is about knowing that we can weather the storm in front of us, that we have the internal and the external resources to do that, and coming through that on the other end and recognizing then the healing that needs to take place
Yeah.
so that our resilience continues to stay high so that we can weather the next storm.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about knowing that we like feeling confident, knowing that we have choices in each moment.
Right.
And I've met lots and lots of parents, the majority of the parents, when they come to work with me, they do not feel like they have any power. They do not feel like they have any choice. They feel
Mm-hmm.
like they're constantly in this reactive mode. What is that about? How do we respond to old traumas and triggers, especially when we're hypervigilant? So getting out of that reactive cycle and knowing no matter what's happening with my child, there is this, I think of it as like a psychological boundary. I'm with them in their distress. They need that attunement, but I'm still have one foot firmly planted in my own body and my own experience so that I know that I can have choices here instead of reacting to their overwhelm and their dysregulation.
Right.
That's the work.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's so hard, right?
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. But what happens when we are not resilient for understandable reasons because of the things that have happened to us, and we find ourselves in this place of fragility, it means that we get swept away in their dysregulation, or we get swept away in the fear of their dysregulation, right? Like you talked about, you hit a little speed bump, and maybe a part of you knows that, but your body is like, wow, get ready,
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
right? Fight or flight, you better get
Uh-huh.
ready. And so, how do we start to recognize what our body's telling us and what is actually happening and know that we have choices then about how to respond? That is resilience. So, healing our nervous system builds resilience. And that's why, again, parents come to talk to me about their child, and we do lots and lots of work on that, but we always end up spending time on that, their experience, their resilience, their nervous system stability, how and where do they need to heal, so that they have the endurance that they need to parent their child from this lens that we talk about for the remainder of their life. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what most of these kids are going to require.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Absolutely. Um, Last thing I wanted to talk about,
Yeah.
because I could talk to you for hours, but I won't do that to you. But last thing I wanted to talk about was window of tolerance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kids' window of tolerance and parents' window of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
tolerance. Can
It's
you tell
it's
us about that?
sure. Yeah. I mean, it's totally it's related to what we were just talking about. So when we think about our ability to emotionally regulate, let's talk about our kids first. Our kids' ability to emotionally regulate, and why do they have these huge, rageful, sometimes episodes over
Hmm.
the smallest things,
Hmm.
the smallest frustrations, the smallest disappointments, the smallest, kind of irritations.
Hmm.
It is because their nervous system is fragile and they have a very, very narrow window of tolerance. Tolerance meaning tolerance for distress, for frustration, disappointment, life stressors.
Right.
So, our nervous system is what helps us with that, keeps us in balance, lets us rise and fall with life stressors. If their window of tolerance is super, super narrow, it's not going to take much to throw them out of their window of tolerance. The good news is emotional regulation, that's a skill that can be built over time.
Right.
We see that in very small kids. We're not born with those skills. It happens through not being told, hey, baby, you need to stop crying so much.
Hmm.
You're
Hmm.
too much. It happens between that baby crying, a regulated adult soothing them, and that happening over and over and over again. That's how emotional regulation skills develop. Parents who have, say, a 12 or 13-year-old who have this very narrow window of tolerance, who still need lots and lots of that repeated, co-regulated attention to build that skill, they don't usually see it that way.
Yeah.
They see it as, why are you getting so upset? You've got to be kidding me. Like
Hmm.
you should, you're acting like a baby, whatever it might be. So that's that narrow window of tolerance. When kids are flipped out of their window of tolerance, and again, we see that through those defensive behaviors, their thinking brain's offline.
Right.
It's a waste of our energy to try to reason with them or, tell them to do something, whatever it might be. The best piece in that moment, the best thing we can do is use our regulated presence to help them come back
Hmm.
into their window of tolerance, just like the baby and the adult who attends to them. Same idea. Where this gets tricky for parents who have been under chronic, prolonged stress because of their child's behaviors is their window of tolerance has narrowed over time.
Right.
And so they have a really difficult time staying within their window of tolerance, especially when met with lots of behavioral symptoms from their child.
Yeah.
So again, that's why we go back to the parent experience. It's like, yeah, what happened to you has caused that. It makes all the sense in the world. It's not because you're weak, you're not good enough, you're a bad parent. Lots of self-compassion.
Hmm.
And how do we help you heal even in the midst of having a child who's still really intense? Like that's going to dissipate in intensity over time. I have confidence about that, but it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
And so, how do we begin you on your healing journey at the same time so that your capacity can slowly over time increase and you have this really healthy and robust window of tolerance where you can, rise and fall with life stressors, including your child's needs, where you're not so irritable
Hmm.
and so thrown off by minor disappointments or frustrations, right? I mean, I always say it's just such a hard way to live. It's hard on
Yeah.
our system. It's hard emotionally and mentally. So that's the interplay between the two. Um, it can be a really hard cycle to be in that causes lots of disruption in relationship,
Hmm.
lots of behaviors on both sides, right?
Yeah.
But once you can see it for what it is and start to disrupt that pattern, there's a lot of healing and hope that
Yeah.
comes from that.
Well, again, I could talk to you for hours. I feel like this is just such valuable information. How can people find you and learn more about your
Ooh,
approach?
yeah. So you mentioned my podcast, which is Brain First Parenting with Eileen Devine. And then you can also find lots of information about the support I provide on my website, which is just my name, eileendevine.com. And I'll also throw out a link that has just a warehousing of lots of free resources for
Hmm.
parents. It's go.eileendevine.com
Hmm.
/free resources. So
Okay.
any one of those will give folks a lot of information on this approach that I teach.
And do you work with parents all over, or is it in specific
Mhm.
areas of the country?
Yeah, no, I work with them
Okay.
all over the world.
Okay. Amazing.
Uh-huh.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said before, I do one-on-one work, but I also have a community and do lots of groups and stuff like that too. So there's a lot, depending on what the parent wants and needs, there's a lot to choose from.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Little Brain Campaign podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Please take a moment to leave a review while you're still thinking about it. It really helps grow the podcast, and I love hearing from our listeners. See you next time.